Hey there, sports fans. How we doing today? We got a insane weekend of football to talk about. We had some Saturday games, some Sunday games. Um, Pretty crazy. Keith's not going to make it today. He's just having some schedule issues. So if you're missing him, just make a mention of it so he knows, you guys care. But otherwise, I'm going to fly solo on this one. We got a few things to talk about. We had some insane. We had three great Saturday games this week. Um, First game on the slate was Indy, Minnesota. Now, if you're an Indy fan, this wasn't such a great game. Um, if you're a Minnesota game, this is an amazing game. It's one of the reasons you guys have one of the best records in the NFL. Great combination of offense and defense in this game. You had a situation where Indy was actually up at one point, 33 to nothing, going into halftime, I believe it was, and wound up losing this one in overtime, 36 to 39. Minnesota put up 22 points to tie it up in the fourth quarter, and another week where Kirk Cousins just balled the hell out, and you had an insane amount of offense on Minnesota's side. On the other side, Indy's more was you had two scores for Indy on defense. You had five kicks and one touchdown. Now you also had them. Jonathan Taylor had an ankle injury and he's going to be out for the season. And Indy wound up. Their defense gave up the biggest comeback in NFL history, 33 points. Dalvin Cook, insane game. That he had 17 carries for 95 yards. Then he had another 4 catches for another 95 yards. He had a touchdown. Osborne had another insane game. Cousins put up 34 passes, 34 of 54. For 460, 4 touchdowns and 2 picks. Did a couple turnovers there, but Osborne caught 10 balls for 157 and a touchdown, and Jefferson caught another 12 for 123 and a touchdown. These guys, their offense is just clicking. They really look like a good playoff team, and the way that their defense was able to pretty much shut Indy down the whole second half of the game. Indy got 5 field goals out of this mess. But the reality of it is it just wasn't enough. From what the reports say, after this weekend, it looks like Matt Ryan's going to get benched for Nick Foles. Going forward, I don't know, if that's really going to make a difference. I don't know if that matters over there right now. But I think at this point, Indy's playing for next season and a little bit of dignity. And Minnesota, on the other hand, again, looks like they're primed and ready to hit the playoffs right now. With one of the best records in the NFL, they stand pretty high on top. On top of their division, no one's catching them, so they're definitely going to get it as a high division team with a really good record. And it was just great. It was amazing to watch what they were able to do in the fourth quarter against these guys. It was one of these, you knew you were watching something really special, and it literally wound up being history. So next game on the slate was a little more boring. It was a Baltimore Cleveland game, but this is a hurt Baltimore team that was coming out without a Lamar Jackson at quarterback. They came in with Huntley, so you got Huntley on one side, you got a very rusty Watson on the other side. Not a lot of offense in this game. It was really the two running backs were the only guys who made any real noise. J.K. Dobbins, another game where he ran all over the field, 13 carries for 125, and Chubb had it on the other side, had his hands on the ball a bit. He had 21 carries for 99 yards. But this was a low-scoring game. Cleveland wound up taking it 13-3. In a game that really, Baltimore, they're a playoff team right now, and they without Lamar coming back, even if they make it to the playoffs, they're not going to be, they're going to be irrelevant. It's a shame that they, if he can't get back before the playoffs start, it's a shame to see them kind of, steal a spot from a team that might be able to do something in the playoffs because they're just not there without him. But next game on the slate was a great game. It was great when they played last time. It was great when they played this time. Minnesota and Buffalo played. Was the late game, and if we ended this one, Buffalo squeaked out a win, 32-29. Great game. Great game. Josh Allen had a really good game. He 25 of 40, but he had 304 and a touchdown. 304 and 4 touchdowns. He ran for 10 carries on, put up 77 yards. And Dawson Knox had 6 catches for 98 yards and a touchdown over there. On Buffalo's side, Tua had a good game, manageable game. Would have liked to see maybe a little more out of him. Hill was kind of quiet in this one. Waddle was your big play guy. Waddle had the 3 catches for 114 and a touchdown, and one of them was just a crazy, insane catch. It was a great play, huge yard catch. Mostert had a good game on the ground, 17 and with 336. But it's nice to see some of these backup guys, some of these low rate, Mostert, Dobbins, some of these other guys, and some of the other games we'll talk about, like guys like McKinnon, you really hear about towards the beginning of the season are really starting to turn themselves around, and in turn really make a big difference come towards a playoff push for these teams. This was a game that Buffalo really needed to win. Miami needed to win too. But because it was a divisional game, it was pretty important. But at the same time, Buffalo's in the number one spot, and if they don't win, they're Kansas City's right on their heels, and Kansas City's got pretty easy games here and there. Plus their offense is pretty intense. So this is one that Buffalo really needed to win, and they managed to come out and they made sure they stayed in the games. They stayed in control of the game as much as they could. And Josh Allen was able to put them in position to take the game home at the end of the game. Congratulations to these guys. They held down the number one seed because even with Kansas City winning, they have the tiebreaker. So we're gonna go congratulations to these guys. Really happy to see that go. But those were our 3 games Saturday, and again, very, very intense. Again, the Minnesota game, overtime, crazy, the comeback. Buffalo just fighting it out, old school football. It was really good stuff. Our first game on our Sunday slate was Philly and Chicago. Good game. Statistically, Hurts had an amazing game. He's really showing out for this MVP. This MVP race. You had a few things happen in this game. Philly wound up winning this one 25-20, a little closer than I think a lot of people wanted it to be. But you have Hurts went 22 for 37. He had 315, no passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He did turn the ball over a little bit, which is really one of the reasons that Chicago was in the game the way they were. But he also carried the ball for 17 carries, had 61 yards, and he had 3 rushing touchdowns. So, he definitely put up his share of points on the board, made sure he did his part. A.J. Brown had 9 catches for 181 yards. No touchdowns, but between the end zones, this guy was on fire. It's what they brought him over for, and he's really making an argument for him being, I think when he doesn't get listed in the top 5 receivers, which is hard to include him based on the way some of these other guys are working. But I think when he doesn't get mentioned in that group, he gets really upset and wants to make sure he's at least brought up in the top 10. And with the numbers he's putting up towards the end of the season, he's just going in. And Devontae Smith also had 3 catches for 126, another big game for him. On the other side of the ball with Chicago, you had a situation where Fields was really the only guy mentionable on this one. Not to be not to shoot down the rest of the guys, but he was the guy putting up all the stats. He led the team in rushing. He also there wasn't a lot of passing going on his side of things. He only had 14 for 21. 157. He did have 152. He did have 2 touchdowns, no turnovers, but he also carried the ball 15 times for 95 yards. And again, led the team in rushing. And with only 14 completions, there wasn't a lot of guys picking up balls and really doing much with them. It was just a couple guys here, a couple guys there. Philly is just now again still we're going into week 16 and they still have only 1 loss, convincingly proving themselves to be a very dominant team. Hurts with that record and the way he's playing is making a good argument for him getting MVP. I'm sorry, rookie of the year, silly. But yeah, MVP. He's definitely, I think right now he might have taken the edge on guys like Allen and whatnot. As far as just the way he plays, playing in the team's record. I know it's not one guy, but at the same time, there's got to be, he's making a good argument that it might not be one guy, but if it is, it's him. So that was our first game on the Sunday slate. Second game was Detroit and the Jets. This is a game that came down to, right to the end of the game. Detroit was able to make a big play to a tight end. He was able to run the ball in and get a touchdown right towards the end of the game. The Jets were held to only 50 yards rushing. Zach Wilson came in this one. He was getting the start with Mike White being hurt, and he went 18 for 35. He had 317. He had two touchdowns and a pick. He did turn the ball over. It did hurt these guys at different times because he turned the ball over. It seemed like at the wrong time. The other rookie guy, Wilson over there, he had 4 catches for 98 yards, and but on Detroit's side of the ball, there really wasn't. Goff had a mediocre game. St. Brown caught 7 passes for 76. It really just, they kind of got lucky, made a few plays when they really needed them. The Jets have been really, the Lions have had a really high scoring offense the last couple weeks. This game it was more of a fizzle offense this week. But they scored enough to get the job done. Big play towards the end of the game, and congratulations to Detroit for really fighting it out. I mean, Detroit's definitely putting themselves in contention to be a team that can make the playoffs. It's getting down to the wire. We only got a few weeks left, so this is a team where every game counts to them, and they really got to work hard to make sure that they're getting in if they want to get in. Because they have an offense, it seems like they might have a shot. They remind me more of Philly last year, but we'll see how it turns out. Next game on the slate was Pittsburgh and Carolina. Pittsburgh and Carolina. This one went. Pittsburgh took this one, 24-16. Kind of an ugly game. You had a game where Pickett was out, so you had Trubisky start. Mediocre numbers for him. We had Najee Harris came out. It was more of a dink and dunk game, back and forth. Nobody really did too much to make a difference. But Najee Harris had 24 carries for 86 yards and a touchdown. Deontay Johnson did catch 10 balls for 98 yards. On the defensive side, for Carolina, Chin really had a great game. He had 14 tackles. He had 11 solo and 3 assists. Really came out. He was all over the field. It seemed like he was on every pile or climbing off of every pile. So, he really went out and did his thing. The next game on the list is, I think, the Houston Texans. After watching this game and after watching what they did with Dallas last week, Houston Texans might actually be the toughest one-win team to be in the NFL. Because these guys they gave Kansas City a run for their money. This one came down to overtime. Kansas City pulled it out 30-24. But again, an overtime game where you saw Mahomes had a great game, but the Texans, for a team that really didn't have a lot of people going off offensively, they managed to put up some. They stayed in the game. Nobody had a great game, but the whole team managed to keep them in it. Some of it really was the defense. But Mahomes, a great game out of him. He had, he only had 5 incompletions. He threw 41 passes. He was 36 for 41. 336 and 2 touchdowns, no turnovers. You think with a game like that, how could they, how is it an overtime game? You had Kelsey with 10 catches for 105. Juju caught 10 for 85. Your big star of the game, honestly, I think it was McKinnon. McKinnon put up a little over 100 all-purpose, about 125 almost. They had 10 rushes for 52 yards and a touchdown. He also had another 8 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown. There's one of these games where he just, it's almost, when you hear the stats, it's hard to even see how, they were able to stay in the game. But if you watch it, Houston's defense just over and over came out and were able to keep them in, in the game. It came down to, at the end of the game, there's Pachenko, I think it was Pachenko. I don't want to say definitely. I'm pretty sure it was him. Pacheco, whatever his name is. I think he had a really big. He had the big touchdown run in overtime to win the game. It was, again, very exciting. Very it was one of those games where you're just like, wow, they're really doing. It was. I couldn't believe Tennessee after. Houston after what they did. Last week to Dallas almost. And then. Coming out this week, really giving Kansas City, one of the best teams in the league, a run for their money. It's kind of crazy, You wonder, what's going on over there. What's wrong, because they're again 1-12. It's and it's 1-13. I don't know. They're 1 in a lot. 1-13-1 or something. 1-12-1. It's not great. It's a shame. But they're a rebuilding team, and hopefully they get the pieces they need to get where they want to be. In the meantime, next game on the slate was Atlanta, New Orleans, and this one hurt a little bit. Atlanta lost this one by a field goal again. Same turnout as the last. last time we played New Orleans. These guys, we lost this one 21-18. And it's a shame. The only reason there's still a little ray of hope is Tampa Bay lost as well. So we're still, only a game behind Tampa Bay. The problem with that is with New Orleans winning and it being a divisional game, that gives them the same record as us with the tiebreaker. So that's a little bit of a, it's going to sting a little. We got some work to do if we want to make the playoffs, but not a ton going on over here in this game. You had, Ritter played, it was his first game as a starter. He played kind of terrible. He had 13 of 26. He only threw for 97 yards. So there's really nobody on the receiving end of guys to talk about. Algier had a great rushing game on the ground. He had 17 for 139 and a touchdown. But it's just outside of that, really, we didn't really do much on our end of things. It was one of those games where we just got, lucky, got a couple scores here and there. Patterson was able to run one in as well. On New Orleans side of the ball, again, they had a really good showing out. Again, Dalton came out and played a game managing game. They had Shaheed catch 3 for 95 and a touchdown, and Dewan Johnson, I think his name is, had 4 catches for Dewan Johnson. 4 catches for 67 and 2 touchdowns. But the guy, he played well, and it was enough for them to beat us. So we'll see what happens. We got a lot of work to do if we want to stay in playoff contention. It's getting late into the season, and the sun's starting to set on the idea. I'm not really for the idea of starting Ritter at this point in the season. We still had something to play for, and I think that this isn't the way to do it. But I'm not a coach for a reason, so whatever. Next game on the slate was another huge upset. I called this one. It wasn't the score I thought. It wasn't the game I thought. But Dallas versus Jacksonville. And Jacksonville won this one. Jacksonville won this one 40-34 in overtime on what seemed like an amazing... it was a crazy play. You had a lot of offense on both sides of the ball. Dak had a pretty good game statistically. You had CeeDee Lamb catch 7 catches for 126. You had Elliott rushing, punch a ball in. Between him and Pollard, they put up, pretty decent yards, over 120. But on the other side of the ball, these guys just, I don't know, they're just so, it's hard to stop these guys. Jacksonville looks exciting. The thing is I think once they get Calvin Ridley over there, they're going to be, maybe get a little backup for Etienne, somebody solid. It's going to be pretty crazy. Lawrence, is really showing a lot of leadership. Again, another guy I don't really like, but the way he's playing is very exciting, I guess, if you're a Jags fan. It's his numbers are 27 for 42. He wasn't perfect. But he also, for 318, 4 touchdowns. One of 3 guys who threw 4 touchdowns this weekend. 4 guys who threw 4 touchdowns, actually, this weekend. Because Burrow also threw 4 touchdowns this weekend. So, you had Cousins, Allen, Lawrence, and Burrow all threw 4 touchdowns this week. So, pretty crazy. He did have 1 turnover, but offensively, these guys, Zay Jones had 6 for 106 and 3 touchdowns. You had Travis Etienne for 19 carries for 103. Kirk, he caught 6 for 92. And it's just these guys are, what they're doing over there is just, it's really, really impressive. You had defensively for Jacksonville, which is where they really, really stepped up in this game. You had Rayshon Jenkins with 18 tackles, 2 interceptions, and a pick 6 in overtime to win the game. And Olakun, who also had 14 tackles himself, 10 solo and 4 assists. These guys are just they're putting up some pretty impressive numbers. It's crazy. Jacksonville's going to be a scary team. They are duking it out for a playoff spot. This puts them at 6-8, and they're not out of the playoff talk. Especially with New England losing, a few of Miami losing, they're definitely in the hunt at this point still, and they're coming in with some momentum, and momentum can be a killer for some teams. So you don't want to get in the way of a bowling ball once it starts rolling down a hill. But at the same time, we'll see what happens. Dallas a little stumble here, but it doesn't really affect them too much. Philly already has the division. Dallas is floating in that one of those wild card spots. So they're still a pretty good record here at 10-4. Nothing that's going to worry about pushing them out of the playoffs. So but at the same time, you don't want to go into the playoffs losing games or on a losing streak. So you want to make sure they start pulling out. You pull out a couple of wins out of these last couple of games here and see what they can do. Next game on the slate was Arizona Denver. This one Denver won this one 24-15. But it was kind of a mess. This was a messy game. You had a bunch of backup quarterbacks, and one of them came at one point. Colt McCoy came out for a little while. So you had another guy in. It was just it was kind of a silly game. Most of the action really was if there was any, was on Denver's side of the ball. You did have a big rushing game. Latavius Murray, 24 carries for 130 and a touchdown. Judy was their leading receiver with 7 catches and 76 yards. But it was Denver's got a real tough defense over there, and Arizona, is just. They're missing a piece, and I'm not sure what. It's quarterback, but the problem is they're not any better with Murray in there. Kyler Murray's kind of a bum. I think they got to start looking at maybe drafting one of these guys. I know they just gave him a lot of money, but I feel like it'd be better for the team to try to get out from underneath that money in maybe the next year or two. And if they can get a good quarterback behind Murray, they might put themselves in position to be okay. But we'll see going forward. In Denver, it's. You don't want to say, you shouldn't even be trying to win these games, but at the same time, because you always want to come out and you want the teams to play. And so it's nice to see that they haven't given up on the season. They're still coming out. They're still playing. But at the same time, again, the game that really didn't. It wasn't a good game. It really didn't matter. I think this is the only game with no playoff implications all week. I don't know if there was. I think this is the only one where there was no team in any kind of hunt or any kind of anything. It was just kind of a bust game, So next game I'll say was New England Vegas, and Vegas wound up taking this one on a crazy play. Right before what would have been overtime with no time left on the clock. Vegas won this one 30-24. If you saw what happened is Vegas managed to get, they fought their way back into the game. They got the game tied up. And you're sitting with a tie, and there's only a few seconds left on the clock. And they run a play with Stevenson up the middle. He gets a huge chunk, but there's almost no time left on the clock, maybe a couple seconds. So he laterals it. He laterals it back to, I believe, Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers from there, I don't know what he's thinking, but he went to try to throw the ball back to Mac Jones. And in doing so, Chandler Jones intercepted the ball. And he wound up taking this ball. I guess it was an interception because it was a lateral pass. So I don't know if they count that as like a fumble, with a fumble recovery. But with no time on the clock, and all they really had to do is kneel the ball down. They would have went into overtime and could have played for the victory then. But again, they tried to do this silly trick play stuff. You could tell Belichick was losing his mind on the sideline when it happened. So I don't think that's a play he called up. I don't think it's what he had in mind for the team at that time. But he... Again, this guy just snatches it out of the air, was able to stay with it, and ran it all the way back in with no time on the clock for Vegas to score, and gave him the win. But at the same time, that's the way the game panned out. Statistically, by the numbers, you had a really good game by a few guys. A very high-end running game in this one. Stevenson had 19 carries for 172, his highest total of his career so far in any game, and a touchdown. Josh Jacobs, 22 for 93. Adams kind of wasn't really relevant in this game. You didn't really see anything from him. Carr's numbers were average. You did see Waller's first game back. He had 3 catches for 48 and a touchdown. It was nice to see him in the football game. You had Is it, it was just a crazy again, dude. It was one of the most exciting end of the game plays in a long time. It was nuts to see. Yeah, I mean, I know some people were losing their minds. Some people couldn't believe it just happened. But the fact of the matter is, it did happen, and it was pretty crazy to see. I know Belichick wasn't real happy. It's not the kind of play they play for. They practice. It's one of those things that I think he could tell. He was like, "No, what are you doing? Just kneel it down." And it didn't happen that way. But all right, so our next game was Tennessee and the Chargers. Chargers took this one, a tight game, low-scoring game, not a lot of crazy action, some good offensive numbers, but Chargers took this one 17-14, and I think out of this one, Derrick Henry pretty much was all over. He was their leading receiver and rusher. Obviously, he had 21 catches for 104 and a touchdown. He also had 4 catches for 59 yards and a touchdown, leading the team in receiving yards and catches. So usually when that's happening with the kind of receiver that he is, they didn't have a good passing game. Tannehill's numbers are mediocre. He came out at one point, came back in. He went out. He had his ankle taped up. They took him into the locker, brought him back. Just really was after that wasn't able to get much out of him. On the other side of the ball, the Chargers side of the ball, this young kid is a fighter. Herbert, he found a way to keep these guys in the game and get them up at the end of the game. 28 of 42, 313. He did have 2 turnovers and no passing touchdowns, which is a shame. Keenan Allen was their leading receiver, 8 catches for 80 yards. But it was just one of those, it was a fun. I like watching this young kid play. Any game Derrick Henry's in is also kind of exciting anyway. Just a game where Tennessee, both teams kind of needed to win. Chargers are fighting for a playoff spot. This helps their argument. This puts them up to 8-6. Tennessee, on the other hand, drops down to 7-7. So this moves things a little bit around over there, shaking things up a bit. But we'll see what happens, and when the playoff picture gets a little clearer in a week or so. A lot of these in the hunt teams are going to eventually be dropping off, and it'll be a little more, a little clearer, less fuzzy as to, so we're not talking about 25 teams out of 32, Next game on the slate was Cincinnati-Tampa Bay. I actually took Tampa Bay on this one. I thought Brady would be able to come out and do it. And again, he had the best game on the field, but at the same time, they were unable to win, dude. They have no real running game. It's non-existent. Their defense without Vita Vea up front is, definitely missing something. Cincinnati was able to put up 34-23 on these guys. It's not, Brady never stopped throwing the ball. The guy came out. He's 30 of 44, 312. He had 2 touchdowns and 3 touchdowns. No, 2 touchdowns and 3 picks. Sorry. And he had 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. Sorry about that. So he had 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. Again, another good game by him. Godwin had 8 catches for 83 yards and a touchdown. Evans was able to catch a few balls. Russell Gage actually had 8 catches for 59 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is kind of a big game for him. On the other side of the ball, though, Cincinnati was just crushing it. Burrows threw for 4 touchdowns. I mentioned him earlier as being one of the 4 guys that did it this weekend. He had 20. He was 27 of 39, fairly efficient. Only 200 yards, not a lot of yards behind him. But he had 4 touchdowns. He did turn the ball over once. Jamar Chase had 7 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. He came out, he's doing his thing. He really looked good. Defensively, Logan Wilson had 15 tackles and a sack. He came out and he was putting it on these guys. It seemed, again, he's another one of those guys that if you watch a game, it seemed like every time they were getting up, off a pile, he was, right there. It was crazy. So congratulations for them. Cincinnati, big win for you guys. This moves you up to 10-4. Makes you juggles things around a little bit in the playoff picture. As far as Tampa Bay losing goes, I think it's great only because Tampa Bay's a divisional team, and this keeps them. Our division's a losing division. It's tough. Somebody's got to get in, and obviously I'm going to be rooting for my guys. So this is one of those things where. I'm pulling for Tom Brady to lose every week right now. Doesn't mean I don't like, I root for him to lose, but I'm also smart enough to know it's hard to bet against this man in December and January. I just keep my fingers crossed and hope, as much as, statistically his numbers are fine, I hope they keep losing. but because we are playing them the last week of the season, week 18. So in 3 weeks from now, it could be could be a division showdown. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. But our 8 o'clock game on the slate for Sunday was the Giants and Washington. This was actually a rematch of a game 2 weeks ago, which ended in a tie, 2020. Now Washington had a bye week after that, and then played Giants again. So they actually played the Giants back-to-back games on the schedule, technically. Where the Giants wound up taking this one this time a little more convincingly. It was 20-12. But there was a controversial play at the end of this game. McLaurin was down on the goal line, and they ran a play, and they wound up getting called for he was offsides. And I know that I guess they check with the line judges regularly when they're on the wideouts are on the end and there's no tight end lined up on that end, because then you have to be up on the line. And I mean, I saw the video, and he definitely looked over at the line judge to make sure he was in the right spot, and the line judge definitely gave him the nod. And then he had a flag thrown on him anyway, so it's kind of a tough one. I mean, definitely something to complain about if you're Washington. But this game had some really some good highlights. Barkley had a good game this week. He had 18 for 87 and a touchdown, caught 5 for 33. Giants are a little weak in the receiving corps, so it was pretty much a dink and dunk game. Danny Jones, had a mediocre stat line. On defensive side of the ball, this rookie Thibodeau, all over the place. They had 12 tackles. He was 9 solo and 3 assists, and was in a sack. And it just really seemed like the guy was. He also had a fumble recovery for a touchdown. The guy was all over everything all game. Crazy. On the other side of the ball, Robinson, Washington didn't do much, but the rookie Robinson, again, came out 12 carries for 89 yards. This is a guy, again, I keep saying it. He's put up really good numbers for his rookie season coming in late. He got preseason ended. He was doing well. Between preseason and the beginning of regular season, he got carjacked by a 17 and a 14-year-old kid, and they shot him twice through the leg. This guy got shot in the leg at the end of August. It was playing by October. Pretty impressive. It's not something that happens all the time. So I'm pretty interested to see what he'll look like with his stats will look like with a full season under him next year. Also, Jahan Dotson, another rookie over there, really strong game, 4 catches for 105 and a touchdown. But these guys are just going ape shit over there. It's really impressive to see how well some of these young talent, McLaurin. Washington's a team that. I don't know if Heineke's long-term the guy or if he's just, the next couple of seasons or what their deal is. But this is a team that's very much in the playoff hunt with with the way things are turning out. Again, this was a somebody had to win game. So Giants in winning kind of bumped Washington out of the playoff mess for right now. At least they're in the hunt. They're not, they don't have a seed because they shook some things up. Either one of these teams could very well make it into the low spot in the playoffs. And neither one of them are 100%. And I don't think either one of them are Super Bowl teams, but they are still good teams. As far as playoff caliber goes, they're doing something to make themselves relevant. Our Monday night game, last game on the slate for the weekend, was the Rams at Green Bay and Lambeau. And Green Bay, for a little while, Rodgers actually looked really good in this game. It was about a quarter and a half. He looked real good. Green Bay did take it. They did enough to stay ahead of these guys, and Mayfield really didn't do much. There wasn't much happening on the other side of the ball, over there either. These guys. It's 24 to 12, and it was really a dud game. Mayfield had a bozo game. It was hit 12 of 21, 111, a touchdown, a turnover. More of the Mayfield we're used to this season. And outside of that, not much going on over there. Cam Akers had a couple balls, about 60-plus yards. Nothing real special. Caught a couple balls, but on Green Bay's side, you had Rodgers had a pretty good game, manageable game. He was 22 of 30, 229. He had a touchdown. He did have a pick. This pick was actually his 10th pick of the season, and one of only a couple seasons ever he's had double-digit picks. So he's this is a little abnormal for him, but he stuck in there. He fought it out. He's able to win the game. You had Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones was the guy this game. Dillon was the guy last game, and this game is Jones' turn. He had 17 carries for 90 yards, and he's able to just, these guys are able to pull out a win in a time where they really, really need one. Green Bay's fighting, they're out of contention for the division with Minnesota where they're at and doing as well as they are. So they're fighting to climb into a playoff spot right now. Again, the sun's kind of setting on them right now. They can't really afford. It's one of those teams that has to have 15 things happen and they can make it in. They have a small percentage of a chance to get into the playoffs. But I think it might be lights out for them over there, even with the win, just because of the way some of the other teams were able to produce this week. But another great week of football. 3 overtime games, 3 insanely exciting games. Again, you had this New England and these Charger games. Both looked like they were going into overtime. Then all of a sudden, boom, boom, boom. Right, 2 plays right at the end of the game. Push those games. Also, I did want to mention in the Minnesota game, you have Justin Jefferson right now is less than 350 yards shy of the all-time season record, and he's only in his 3rd season. He's also already had a 1,616 yard season last year. So he's already got 2 1,600 plus yard seasons in his career. He's going ape shit. The kid's 3 years in and he's just nuts. He might possibly be the number 1 receiver in the NFL this year. If you ask me, I put him at 1, Hopkins 2. Then you have Adams, Hill, and Diggs probably are going to be my next, my top 5 probably. I know there's some guys you could argue here, there, a little bit, this, that, you start really getting the details. But I think those guys are your top 5. I think Jefferson's really established himself as the best receiver in football. Between the play, the numbers, it's very intense. And I mean, he's definitely the key to that team's success. Not that the rest of these guys aren't doing well, but I think they thrive around his ability to make the plays he does. I'm really looking forward to these last couple of weeks. They get pretty insane. Hopefully we'll get Keith back next week for some of these videos. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed the weekend review, and check us out for our Thursday night preview. We have an interesting game with the Jets. Oh, is it the Jags and the Jets coming up this Thursday? So keep an eye out for that. We'll have that video posted as well. Have a good night.